super excited to be sitting here with Peter and Duncan Lloyd at Coriol.
Tell me what.
First wine up is a 2020 vintage, so pretty new. So a 2020 Picpoul.
Picpoul?
Picpoul.
So some of the viewers may not have heard of this variety before.
I think it's fair to say that probably 99.99% of the world's population have never heard of this
definitely
variety
haven't.
before.
So tell us about the variety.
So it's, I guess its native home is in southern France, and it's really a wine that just has beautiful delicacy and freshness. It grows in France along the coast, and where there's a lot of oysters grown as well. So it's sort of known as a great seafood oyster match. But yeah, we brought in the first cuttings about 10 years ago now. And
Wow. Is that first in Australia?
yes, yeah.
Wow.
So we rang up a mate who did vintage with us, I don't know, probably 15 years ago, and said, "Hey, Thibaut, can you go down to the local nursery and get some sticks for us?" So he did, and he wrapped them up in wet newspaper and put them in a bag and sent them across, express post, and which is illegal unless you notify customs that they're coming in. And so
I'm glad you threw it.
that whole quarantine process takes a few years, and then it takes another 3 or 4 years to establish a vineyard that you can actually get some fruit from. So it's about a 8-year process of of a vineyard sitting there doing nothing when it could be growing perfectly good Shiraz. So there's a huge cost to doing it, but hopefully the outcome is positive, which with Picpoul definitely is.
I've got to say one thing though. We're not a wine tasting show. We're a wine drinking show. So the tide's a bit
can
low.
manage that.
The tide's a bit low on the first pour.
I like to just...
It was up to Holly to tell you.
You'll learn, Duncan.
That was
You'll
my
learn.
mistake.
Novice, obviously.
Novice, but yeah.
So what are we meant to taste when we
I think
take a sip?
this is, aromatically, you just get some quite pretty florals. I get sort of some white jasmine flower, and a kind of almost like a cypress
really
note, and a bit of kind of lemon, lemon rind, lemon zest. So it's quite delicate, and that's sort of the real charm of it, I guess.
Which was important because the wine we'll try after Fiano is another wine variety that was started by our father here in Australia. But that's much different, much more texture, much richer. Whereas, something like Picpoul is fantastic, especially for an Australian lifestyle where we're used to eating oysters, or some of us are, apart from yourself. But, oysters, shellfish, delicate foods.
It's really nice. It's really easy to drink.
It's got a different aroma though, hasn't it?
It's got this nice mix of savoury and fruity, which is really lovely. The reason that we or that our family were interested in it is that the majority of this production is actually sold in the UK. Okay. The appellation in the south of France is called Picpoul de Pinet. And a lot of it ends up in the UK, where it's really a pretty cheap wine. So if you go into a standard bistro or something in the UK and you've got a wine list, and this might be there at £3 or £4 a glass.
Not the Coriol Picpoul.
Not the Coriol.
No, of course.
Just calling out the sort of French versions.
So it'll often be that sort of entry-level wine, but you'll go up and there might be white Burgundy, there might be a white Rioja, there might be whatever at 3 or 4 times the price. But for us, this just had great reliability and it had that underdog status. It was like, hold on, this is actually a really lovely wine.
It's really nice.
And it deserves, higher respect than probably it's given.
Interestingly, it's the last white that we pick. So normally we'll start off with some Chenin Blanc and then move into Fiano, and you start with your whites and then you will start getting into sort of reds, into Shiraz. And usually we've started to pick some of the reds and then the Picpoul comes in.
So it's on the vine longer.
It's on the vine a bit longer.
Why?
Look, I think it's just the natural variety. It tends to ripen a bit later. It does need a bit of work in the vineyard. It will throw a lot of bunches if you let it. So it needs to be, we need to go through and do bunch thinning every season and shoot thinning. But also where we get it is a pretty low Baumé. So if you're thinking about your sugar ripeness and therefore your alcohol in your wine. So we usually get this at around sort of 11.5, 11.8 Baumé. So that's why we end up with around that, 11.8 to 12% alcohol. I think this was 12.1 from memory to this year. So a reasonably low alcohol. and I guess that's also a nice thing about it. And so it's just fresh, delicate.
It's not very
nice
not
and
very
zippy.
sweet. Kind of surprised me. So
No.
low sugar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very dry, and you get that kind of almost a saline character and a minerality in the wine as well. So I guess that's why it works.
So well with oysters.
Yeah,
Oysters.
And I mean,
Which we bought especially for you.
Did you?
We heard you love
Excellent.
oysters.
Oh, I love oysters. The oysters paired with the wine.
Yep.
Now, why why seafood?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think you in this wine, it's probably a lot to do with about the kind of minerality, the kind of the delicacy. I guess in this situation, you're probably really looking for things like oysters or quite, delicate whitefish, kind of simple seafood.
Especially in summer, just like the freshness.
Yeah, and that to get that real, an oyster's all about the hit of the sea. And the Pickpool kind of mirrors that as well. It's got that, saline.
I mean,
quality.
the simplest way to, you can sit in seminars that go for weeks that talk about food and wine matching, but the simplest, I guess the key is that it's like with like.
Yep.
And so that if you have a wine that shows this sort of sea spray salty character, well then what's the perfect accompaniment is something like an oyster.
Right.
And that's a very simple, massive generalisation, but because the field of food and wine matching is so fraught with, this might go with that, it might go, oh no, don't do asparagus, don't do broccoli, whatever.
Yep.
When you're trying to just make things simple, like with like is sort of the
All right, so I'm interested, Holly, to
I
hear.
forgot to take my oyster.
Oh,
I know. Usually I'm first.
Ladies first. I'm interested. Have a taste of the wine. Have some oyster, then have a taste afterward, and let the layman know what the difference is. Oh, we've got another question. Are there certain French varieties that thrive in South Australia?
Yeah, I guess that's a pretty kind of open-ended question.
I'm going.
Yeah,
Going for the oyster.
yeah. Go for the
I
oyster.
think I need a fork.
Use
Use my fingers.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
So
I guess-
they do. Obviously, you said that
certainly there are.
takes a bit of effort, though. You said.
Well, if you look at our history, back in the 80s and the 70s, if you go into our cellars, you'll see a lot of French varieties, things like Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Semillon, Sauvignon Blanc, Cabernet Franc, which have all been planted here at some point, Riesling even. And, but that wasn't that long ago, but we look at it now and we think, God, what were we thinking? Like, those varieties are so ill-suited to this region.
Yeah.
Region.
But, that just shows how far education has come and the general understanding of viticulture. And so now typically if we're looking for good fits for, this is McLaren Vale specifically, we'll be looking to the south of France or
Yep.
to the south of Italy. There are other anomalies that exist for various reasons, but there's certain varieties that it would be very hard for us to go with full force and produce Riesling and Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, for example, with full confidence in McLaren Vale. So our attention certainly shifts.
Do we have a similar climate?
to definitely the south of France, or areas of Languedoc, Provence, into the sort of southern Rhone Valley. Is so Grenache, Mourvèdre, Cinsault, Carignan, Grenache Blanc, Picpoul. They're the varieties that I guess are probably the well suited to it.
What do we think?
It's delicious.
Delicious?
Kind of complemented.
Perfect
the wine.
pairing?
Perfect. Yeah.
So the wine was
really,
better
really nice.
after the oyster.
I think it just yes.
Or was
definitely.
the oyster better after the wine?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of oysters. But actually, it worked. Like it was really nice.
Well,
Excellent.
that's,
It was really,
come,
really
come on,
nice.
boys. You got to have your oyster as well.
Yeah,
I've already- I've already finished my
oysters,
one.
Ollie? I'll have.
Yeah, you already finished yours?
Yeah.
I've been savouring mine because the tide was low.